So obviously, enormous challenges for G7 leaders as they met. Was progress made?
Well, you know what? It's very different than the G20, of course. When the finance ministers met in India 3 months ago, there was a bit of discord as far as phraseology, language, in what was going to be a communique that would condemn Russia's obvious war in Ukraine. They were not able to agree on that kind of terminology at the G20 because, of course, Russia and China are in the G20 and some other members as well, perhaps showing a little bit of resistance or hesitancy to condemn it outright. But the G7 really wanted to show a much more united front. And the term I kept on hearing in Niigata was like-minded economies, like-minded countries. So those G7 nations putting out a statement again, offering more support for Ukraine, also a plan to diversify supply chains. That is basically code word for relying less on China for the supply chains, and also vowing to fill in the gaps in financial regulation globally in light of those bank collapses that we saw. However, their assessment of the global economy is resilient, but warned against any complacency. It all sets the table for later this week when, of course, the leaders of the G7 nations, including President Biden, will be in Hiroshima. We travel here from Niigata to Tokyo, now down to Hiroshima for the Leaders Summit that begins at the end of this week. And all these issues will be front and center. We're also hearing that there could be a trilateral meeting on the sidelines of the G7 Leaders Summit between Kishida of Japan, Yoon of South Korea, and Joe Biden, where they'll talk about shared responsibilities for a number of different security issues. This is the Japanese Finance Minister Suzuki, what he had to say as they wrapped up in Niigata on the weekend.
Over the 3-day period, we had a very candid exchange of views. We think we were able to agree on many of the results that will be linked to the upcoming Hiroshima Leaders Summit.
So obviously there'll be much more geopolitics discussed behind closed doors at the G7 Leaders Summit. North Korea will be front and center, obviously, as well as those supply chain issues. And again, the export controls that the United States is pushing for with key partners like South Korea and Japan, trying to get them fully on board.